Ryan and Corinna Cooper seemed like the perfect family. They lived in the quiet heartland of America in a small Iowa town. Ryan, a dedicated farmer, spent long hours working the land, providing for his family. Corinna, a talented barber, owned her own salon and dreamed of opening more. They had been married since 2009 and were raising 3 children in a blended family. To the outside world, their life was stable and happy. A hard-working man, a woman with big dreams, and a loving home. But like a house with a weak foundation, their perfect life was secretly falling apart. Cracks were forming, hidden from everyone. This quiet unraveling would soon come to a violent end on a warm June morning in 2021. The peaceful quiet of the Iowa morning was shattered at 4:35 a.m. on June 18, 2021. A frantic 911 call came into the Tama County Sheriff's Office. The caller, Corinna Cooper, said someone had been shot at her home. A police deputy raced to the scene, arriving just 7 minutes later. What he found inside was a shocking and chaotic scene. A man, later identified as her husband, Ryan Cooper, was in a recliner, bleeding heavily from his face. Corinna was on top of him, screaming hysterically. But the deputy noticed something strange. She wasn't trying to help him. Ryan's body lay still, a life tragically ended in the heart of his own home. As the first deputy took control of the scene, other people emerged from the house. Corinna's 3 children and Ryan's brother, Aaron, who had just arrived after getting a desperate call from Corinna. The police quickly moved everyone out of the house to secure the area and ensure their safety. Paramedics arrived soon after, but it was too late. There was nothing they could do. Ryan Cooper was officially pronounced dead at the scene. The house, which had once been a symbol of family life, was now a crime scene, a place where a life had been taken, leaving behind a family in shock and a mystery for the investigators to solve. The crime scene itself told a different story than Corinna's panic. The initial investigation raised several red flags for the police. They saw what looked like 2 gunshot wounds to Ryan's head, both at close range. An autopsy would later confirm he had been shot twice. The manner of death was ruled a homicide. A single .22 caliber shell casing was found on the floor, but the murder weapon was nowhere to be found. Strangely, there were no signs of a struggle or a forced entry into the home. Nothing was stolen. The house was calm except for the tragedy that had taken place. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. This was personal. Corinna's initial story was simple. She told the officers that she had been asleep in the bedroom and had woken up to find her husband shot. Once the house was secured, she was taken to the police station for a formal questioning. As she sat down with detectives, she had already signed a form giving them permission to search her cell phone. What she didn't know was that the detectives were already one step ahead. They had her phone. They were getting tips in real time, and the physical evidence at the crime scene didn't support her version of events. The puzzle pieces of the case were not fitting together as she claimed they should. In the interrogation room, Corinna described the sound that woke her up. She said it sounded similar to a wire rack falling in the shower. But she didn't hear any other noises. No cars speeding away, no one talking, no doors slamming. The detectives listened carefully, but her story had holes. She also said she tried to get a gun from their bedroom safe, but couldn't get it open because of a fingerprint lock that didn't work. She said she was scared, not knowing if someone was still in the house. She was a mother trying to protect her kids, she said. But her actions seemed strange, and her story was starting to fall apart under questioning.
While Corinna was being questioned, her brother-in-law, Aaron, was in another room. He was the first person she had called, and he arrived at the house just before the police. Aaron provided a crucial piece of information. He told investigators that Ryan had recently seen a Snapchat message on Corinna's phone from a man named Houston Danker. The message seemed to be about something intimate. This new information made the detectives immediately suspicious. They ordered forensic experts to search and review Corinna's Snapchat data right away. The police now had a new person to investigate and a new path to follow. The interview with Corinna continued as the detectives waited for the results of the Snapchat data search. They asked her if there had been any problems in her marriage. She admitted they had a rough patch after Ryan's mother died. They weren't communicating well, she explained, but she insisted that their marriage was never in doubt. She denied having any affairs and said she didn't worry about Ryan having any either. They were a simple, boring couple, she said. "We don't go anywhere. We don't do anything," she told them. She was trying to paint a picture of a normal, stable marriage, but the detectives were no longer convinced. Detectives pressed Karina further, asking about the Snapchat message Aaron had mentioned. She acted confused, saying it was from last fall and wasn't even meant for her. She claimed Ryan saw a message from Houston Danker about a married woman and a picture. She said Houston swore it was sent by mistake. She said the issue was resolved and they had since talked it out. She then tried to distance herself from Houston, saying she no longer cut his hair or talked to him to make Ryan feel better. Her story seemed to change as she spoke, and she tried to downplay the significance of the event. The detectives had a different view of Karina's story. They confronted her with a specific message. "Remember those casings?" A Snapchat from Houston Danker at 3:31 a.m., just an hour before Ryan was shot. Her reply, "Absolutely, 100%. This message was a game changer. It looked like a plan. The detectives now had a strong reason to believe Ryan's death wasn't a random act. They had proof of communication between Karina and Houston just before the murder. This message connected the two of them to the crime and completely changed the direction of the investigation. With this new evidence, the detectives were ready to confront Karina directly. They started by asking her about Houston Danker. She admitted he was a friend, but denied anything more. She told them that Houston was only 22 and that the town was full of stupid rumors. She said she had cut his hair and watched his kids a couple of times when his babysitter canceled. She laughed at the idea of a relationship, but the detectives were not amused. They knew more than she thought, and they were looking for a confession. They wanted to know the true nature of their relationship. Detectives brought in Houston Danker for questioning. He was the man behind the Snapchat messages, and now a key person of interest. They cut straight to the point, telling him about the rumors of an affair and Ryan's death. Houston admitted he had been Snapchatting with Karina since October or November. He described it as just random snaps, pictures of his day, nothing more. He said he used to get his hair cut by her, but stopped because it was no longer convenient. He also mentioned that the small town was full of rumors about them. Houston claimed he and Karina were just friends. He said she was like a gay best friend to him, and that she'd helped him out by watching his kids a couple of times when his babysitter canceled. He laughed at the idea of a relationship, but the detectives were not amused. They knew more than she thought, and they were looking for a confession. They wanted to know the true nature of their relationship.
The detectives listened, but they had more. They told him they had cloned the data from Karina's phone, and they could see everything, even deleted messages. They knew he was not telling them the whole truth. The detectives explained to Houston that they weren't accusing him of being a killer just for having an affair. They were simply trying to get to the truth. They told him that people have affairs all the time and that it doesn't make him a murderer. They were trying to get him to open up and confess to the affair, hoping it would lead to more information about the murder. They told him that they could get everything from the phones, so there was no point in lying. Houston, still nervous, continued to downplay his relationship with Karina. Houston finally admitted that Ryan knew about the Snapchat messages. He said Karina had mentioned it to him, but downplayed it as well. He tried to make it seem like a non-issue. He said it was just random Snapchat expletive and that he and Karina had been friends. However, his story was still not adding up. The police had a Snapchat message from him to Karina sent just before the murder. The message, "Remember those casings," was not a random snap. It was a direct question about ammunition. This was a clear sign of a planned crime. The detectives knew that Houston was lying. They knew he was involved in something more serious than a simple affair. The message about the casings was a clear sign of a premeditated murder.
The police had the evidence, and they were not going to let him get away with it. They continued to press him, but he stuck to his story. He said he and Karina were just friends and that he had nothing to do with the murder. The police knew they had to find the murder weapon and more evidence to connect him directly to the crime. The police had a lot of evidence, but they needed to piece it all together. They had the 911 call from Karina, her conflicting story, and her strange behavior at the crime scene. They had Aaron's information about the Snapchat messages. They had the crucial message about the casings. They had Houston's conflicting statements. All the evidence pointed to a conspiracy between Karina and Houston to murder Ryan. The motive seemed to be an affair and a desire to get rid of the husband who was in the way. The detectives began to build a strong case against Karina and Houston. They had the digital evidence from the phones, which showed a clear pattern of communication. The message about the casings was the final piece of the puzzle. It proved that the murder was planned and not a random act of violence. The police knew that Karina and Houston were co-conspirators. They had worked together to plan and execute the murder. The investigation concluded that Houston Danker was the one who pulled the trigger. Karina, who had been in a secret relationship with him, was the mastermind. She had planned the murder with him and had even tried to cover it up with her false story. She had her gun in the bedroom closet, which Houston had likely used to shoot Ryan. She was never able to open it, as she was just a liar. The perfect family from a small town was a lie. It was a story of betrayal, lies, and murder. Ryan's death was not a random act of violence, but a planned murder by the two people he trusted the most. The quiet Iowa town was left in shock, and the truth of what happened on that June morning finally came to light. The detective continued to press Houston Danker, asking about his personal life. Houston explained he had 2 young children with the same mother, but they weren't together.
He said the kids were very close in age, about a year apart. He told the detective he didn't have much time to get his hair cut and that Karina only watched his kids a few times when his usual arrangements fell through. He painted a picture of himself as a struggling single dad, not a man having a secret affair. He claimed the gay best friend description was a way to explain his friendship with Karina to a small town full of gossip. Houston described meeting Karina at her salon and said they had always known each other from growing up in the area. He said their friendship had started to grow when she began helping with his children. He insisted that their conversations were just random snaps and that there was nothing inappropriate happening. The detective, however, was still skeptical. He asked Houston directly if the police would find any compromising photos or messages on their phones. Houston denied it, but the detective knew a full digital search would tell the real story. The detective then began to shift his questioning to Houston's alibi for the night of the murder. Houston explained his day, saying he worked until the evening, got gas, and then went home alone. He said he went to bed around 11 p.m. The detective then revealed they were using a geofence to track all phones in the area around the time of the shooting. Houston confidently stated that his phone wouldn't be found in the box around Ryan's house. He also said that no surveillance cameras would have captured his vehicle near the scene. Before letting Houston go, the detective asked him if Karina had ever complained about her marriage or Ryan. Houston said their friendship wasn't like that, and he was more of a helpless single dad who needed a hand. He maintained that he was just a friend. Houston was released, but the investigation was far from over. A few hours later, a digital warrant for his phone and accounts was obtained. The police quickly discovered he had searched for incriminating things like, "Can old open Snapchats be found again?" and "Where do murderers go to prison?" The search history was damning, but still not a smoking gun. The murder weapon was still missing, there was no confession, and the ballistics evidence was inconclusive.
The case had shifted from a random act of violence to a targeted homicide, but more evidence was needed to make an arrest. For nearly 3 years, investigators worked tirelessly, re-interviewing witnesses and analyzing all the digital records. Their hard work eventually paid off, and the case began to move forward. New witnesses came forward with information that corroborated the police's theory. Karina herself began to reveal more details during later questioning. She admitted to her ongoing affair with Houston Danker and even made prior comments about wanting Ryan dead. She had once even said she could shoot him in the face. The case was building, and the police were getting closer to the truth. In the spring of 2024, detectives received a major break in the case. They learned that Houston Danker had given a rifle to a co-worker to hold for several months. The gun, a .22 caliber Ruger, matched the type of weapon used to kill Ryan. Although the bullet was too damaged to create a definitive match, it provided a strong link to Houston. With this new evidence, the police had everything they needed. On February 19, 2024, Karina Cooper was arrested for first-degree murder. 2 months later, Houston Danker was also charged as a co-conspirator. At Karina Cooper's trial, the prosecution laid out their case. They claimed she and Houston had conspired to kill Ryan for his $500,000 life insurance policy. With no eyewitnesses, the state relied heavily on the digital trail. They presented the Snapchat messages exchanged just before the murder and cell data that placed Houston near the home.
The prosecutor argued that the motive was simple: greed. The defense tried to shift the blame to Houston Danker, claiming he had manipulated Karina. They argued that her intimate messages were just a fantasy and not a part of a conspiracy. They also pointed out that the life insurance money was meant for the children, not for Karina. In a risky move, Karina took the stand to defend herself. Under questioning, she admitted to having a relationship with Houston, but called him an online inappropriate relationship, not a lover. The prosecution showed the jury messages from Karina to Houston, where she called Ryan a sperm donor and expressed a wish for a rogue semi to kill him. Karina tried to explain it as a dark part of her mind, but it was clear that she hated her husband. A message from Houston to Karina on the day before the murder spoke of having his hands on her P word soon. Karina's last message to him was soaked. The jury was presented with a clear case of betrayal and murder. After 4 hours of deliberation, the jury found Karina Cooper guilty of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Houston Danker is awaiting his trial, facing the same fate.
In the end, Karina Cooper and Houston Danker were both arrested and charged with the murder of Ryan Cooper.